Welcome, everybody, to our fourth webinar of 2025. We're really excited about the information that we've been providing over the last 4 months. Our first webinar was really focusing on communications and the importance of communications and marketing in reaching donors and the best ways to be looking at strategically doing that. Then we started to focus on the area of the different types of planned gifts, the different types of major gifts, and the different ways to present them. And then we got into the area of structuring your case for support in a digital format so that your donors can actually see themselves immersed in your story and go on a donor journey. But today we're going to be talking about planned giving. And so my name is Bill Petruk, and I'm involved with Funding Matters, with Giftabulator, with iShare, and we're really excited to be talking about something that is as fundamental to fundraising as planned giving. Planned giving is instrumental in your donors' lives, and for a number of reasons. The planned gift ties into so many different components, into their estate plans, into their financial plans. And it's a great way for you to be engaging in a conversation with your donors because there is a magic to this of creating powerful donor discussions around planned giving. And when we start to look at, where you are at in terms of your fundraising cycles, planned giving should be always incorporated as part of that discussion because you never know where your donor is at in their own plans and their own thinking and what they're thinking about doing for themselves as well as for their families and for their communities. So what we want to do is spend some time today to focus on how you can be taking the information from today's presentation and actually having your next donor conversation today with a donor to actually start the process of getting them to start thinking about their estate plan, their financial plan, and their philanthropic plan that involves you. So without any further ado, I'll tell you that today's session is being recorded. It's going to be available on our website, and you can go to our YouTube page where all the other videos and presentations that we've been doing over the years and over the last several months, you can access them for your own reference purposes. So I've just come back from Edmonton at the CAGP conference, and I have to tell you that probably between 1/3 and 40% of the presentations and the people attending were involved from the financial services sector. Now, we can look at that as a good thing, and we can look at that as a challenge for a lot of charities. And so one of the areas that I look at it as good is because not only are financial advisors becoming far more literate in the areas of charitable giving, and they're building it into their practices. At the same time, it's a bit of a challenge if a lot of those donations that could be earmarked as planned gifts or major gifts end up in donor advised funds as opposed to being set up specifically as a donor advised fund for your organization as a DAF or as an endowed gift. So let's start off with the fundamentals. What is a planned gift? And so when we start to look at the key words are there. Something that is planned and is a gift. So the planned gift is basically, exactly what it says it is. But to make a planned gift, you have to do some planning. And that planning has to start today or in the very near future with you and your donors to look at something that may happen at a future date. Or it may happen a lot sooner than that, especially when we start to think about the different assets that may be incorporated into an estate plan, that may also illustrate what might be an option for your donors to be thinking about. What kind of donation types? Is it a bequest? Are they thinking of doing something with their securities? Have their assets appreciated? Have they appreciated from when they first bought it to what they're worth today? Is there insurance that might be a component of it? So when we start to look at the different elements here, and then their charitable remainder trusts, not a very popular vehicle, but has been a very popular vehicle for a lot of individuals that are thinking about having businesses that they're looking at buying and selling. So if they're selling their business and there's going to be a large gain associated with it, possibly a charitable remainder trust can be factored into their tax planning. With life insurance, there is another opportunity that brings in, the financial professionals that can be assisting your donors and you illustrate maybe a strategy that may help them in their planning. The RSPs are something that we're going to be touching on a little bit, the registered investments, that from the standpoint of how a registered investment, an RSP or a RIF, might be a very popular and very easy donation vehicle as part of a planned gift. And then the gifts of securities that everyone's familiar with, stocks, mutual funds, and how they all can be incorporated either as a whole, as part of a bequest, or individually. And so start to look at what stocks may be highly appreciated, what might be used as part of a donation, or how the entire estate itself might be taxed. So as you can see, there are many directions to be going in that can benefit you and your discussions with your donors. And as part of all of that, there's this little guy here called Chatbot Phil, and Phil is short for philanthropy. And Phil is really here to actually help you understand some of the ways that you can be incorporating a bit of cadence into your conversations around estate gifts, around current gifts, around planned giving with your donors. And you can give Phil as an example to, some of your donors for how they can see for themselves, how they can be incorporating this with their advisors and yourself. So remember, within a planned gift, there are three entities that are important. The first entity is the donor, and that your donor is the most important person in terms of the process of understanding what it is that they may lack, should be thinking about, incorporating in their way of looking at their estate plans. So that's one thing. Two is the financial advisor, professional advisors. Financial advisors, wealth advisors, whatever they are referring to themselves, lawyers and accountants. And so how do all of those areas of professional advice factor in? And then the third leg of that stool is you and your organization. You and your organization in terms of the relationship that you have with your donor, the relationship that your donor has with their advisor. And if you get those three Venn circles coming together, you're going to end up with potentially the largest gift that you have received for your organization, or better still, the largest donation that that individual has ever made in their lives. So that's really, when I start to think about planned giving, the word planned is an important part of it because it is sometimes a long-term relationship, but other times it may be very brief and the individual wants to do something and they want to do something now because they've seen the opportunity that you've presented to them. So why planned giving matters. So let's look at, first of all, I should have registered planned giving matters when I was registering funding matters. It would have been a perfect fit, but planned giving matters is really important for a number of reasons. First of all, the people who care about your organization and donate to your organization every single year, every single month on a monthly giving program, whenever you're making an appeal, those individuals are the ones that you should be having meaningful conversations with by asking the Socratic question, you know, extracting where their thoughts are in terms of, do you have a will? And you'll find out that a significant number of individuals might have a will, but it's not a current will. Things and circumstances have changed in their lives. And that part of that circumstantial change in their life, things will there will be gaps with that particular individual. And when they start to look at what a current will is, something that has been updated in the last 7 years, well, for many people, a lot of things have changed in the last 7 years. Family addition, losing family members, the needs of the individual have changed, their employment status, they may have been working and now they're retired and they've got other incomes coming in from other streams. And their investment horizons have changed as well. But these are things that we start to look at that only 5% of individuals who actually support charities in their lifetime, 5% of those individuals have a charitable bequest in their will. So 95% of the people who support you do not have a charitable bequest in their will. And that is a gargantuan missed opportunity, because not only have these individuals been sustaining your organization, sustaining your missions for generations, not only themselves, but also their family. And those same individuals are now not, taking the next step. And why haven't they been taking that next step? Is it because we haven't been asking? Is it because we've been waiting for them to come to us and actually make the decision, the determination? We know that on average, the average donor actually supports 4 charities every single year. Those are 4 charities. They might be giving $100 or $500 or $1,000 every single year, but they're typically 4 charities, and you want to be one of the 4. If you think that you're already getting money from your donors, those are your best prospects to have conversations with. And we realize that incorporating a bequest, leaving a bequest, could be the largest donation that your donor has ever made in their lives to your organization. But it's probably, in some cases, the largest donation that you as an organization have received. And it's a great way to showcase to others how giving to your organization is seamless. It continues along a path that allows your donors to start by giving you good annual donations, looking at special projects, and then everything stops. Why would it stop? Why would that conversation not continue? It probably continues because there's a big question mark with your donors, a question mark with your donors who are engaging with their wealth advisors, their accountants, and their lawyers. They're not having the conversation. They're not having that conversation that will move that needle on the 5% of your donors that are giving. And how do we move that to the next level? Because part of your case for support, part of your raison d'etre is to show that you need their funding to maintain your sustainability year after year, possibly long after they're gone. But better still, while they're still alive, you could still be incorporating plan giving strategies that they can be seeing their money at work now. And this is where a lot of community foundations that we've worked with in the past have looked at the give and grow component. They can be actually giving to something that would have a portion of their gift actually earmarked for a current project, and then grow because they can be putting their money into a fund, an endowment fund, a DAF, or whatever it would be, or their foundation that would continue to grow and support their programs and services. And I'm going to show you an example of that a little bit down the road. But these donations are a low cost. Low cost for 2 reasons. One is low cost because this is the area that most organizations put the least amount of investment in. plan gifts. But it's a low cost because what you're really doing is you're actually just alerting the individual to what they can be doing for themselves that have a great impact for their families and for the organizations that are very important to them. So we really want to focus on that. Like the 85% are those, the 85 percenters are those that are there with you right now. They're the ones that it should be the easiest conversation to have because they're currently supporting you, but they're lacking the information that they need to be making an informed decision. So one of the things that we look at here is to look at options and the options around plan giving. So what we're going to look at two options that are available. The first one is to look at bequests in a will or a trust. So one thing that we do know, going back to that discussion about wills, is the fact that most people don't have a current will. And most people, again, don't have a charitable bequest in their will. But there are different ways to be looking at even giving consideration to what might be in a will. You know, you could be looking at giving a percentage of the value of the estate. You can leave a specific amount, which is on average about $50,000 is the number that most individuals would come up with in their estate plans to leave to a charitable organization as part of the bequest. Is that the right strategy for them to be looking at? And then we start to look at the different other type of options that may be incorporated in this, and that is something that really doesn't affect their lifestyle. So their lifestyle is in such a way that they will have enough money to live according to the way they have lived up until that point, the money that they will need as they get older for healthcare and things like that. And the beauty of this is it's an ongoing dynamic discussion. To start the discussion with the individual, with their advisors, to start that process that really engages everybody. And this is really a burden that a lot of people carry with them, is what are the things that they should be doing that actually incorporate this concept of estate planning, of future planning, of plan giving, and how does that actually all factor in? So when we get to that, here's an example. So remember, I was talking about a specific amount, like $50,000. But we would want to look at, you know, something in a person's estate plan based on where they live. So let's just assume that they live in Ontario. Let's look at a number that can be their value of their estate and what their cost of their estate was. So this is an easy number. $1 million, the number here of $1 million is kind of an easier number to think about and actually come to a determination what makes up that $1 million. Would it be, you know, their stocks, their mutual funds, the bonds? There would be things like if there's a small business involved in that, other income streams that they may have had that factor into it, like dividends or monthly stipends that come in. So that's a number that can be calculated relatively easy. This number, the original cost of the estate, is one that always leaves people a little bit perplexed. You know, well, how do I know what the original cost of my estate was? What did I pay for those shares? What did I pay for those units in the fund? What did I pay for? You know, on and on. So we start to look at comparing. But this is where the financial advisor happens to play an important role. But more importantly, you play an even more important role by highlighting this to the donor, by highlighting to the fact that if they don't have a current will, there are, you know, things that are going to transpire between that $300,000 and $1 million. Well, if I just did the simple math, that's a $700,000 gain, capital gain. And of that, it's taxable. And it would be taxable at the highest value. So when we start to look at if they left the specific amount, and we're going to go into showing the scenario. If they left a specific amount and they said it was going to be $100,000, so they're going to leave a specific amount. But if they did that, if they didn't do that, then CRA would be expecting $172,235. So that's a big number that's going to be coming off this $1 million. So what we want to do is let's put in a number of 100,000. Well, immediately the tax goes down to $128,123. So you're starting to see, well, it's not 172, it's 128. But on top of that, the government of Canada, CRA, gives you a tax credit for this $100,000. So they are your partner. They are your donor's partner. They are your partner as an organization receiving this funding to actually say to the donor, you're going to get a $144,000 tax credit. That's going to offset this tax, part of this tax number, by making this $100,000 donation. And in the end, you're going to have your heirs receive $827,000. The government is adding $144,000 to this donation, and the reality is you are going to be in a much better situation. So between $100,000 going to the charitable organization, your organization, the estate gets a $44,000 tax credit, reduces the tax to $128,000, and the heirs get $771,877. That's pretty good. And that's a great way just to start, if you had to ask the question, of this 172, how much would you like to give to CRA? And we really didn't get into that at the outset, but really that when you start to look at your organization, your donor, their advisors, and then there's the government. So if you want to look at what a $100,000 bequest would be for your donor, that's a great way for them to start thinking about it. But then we start to look at, well, they don't know what the right number might be, but they might be thinking about something, the exact same scenario. They live in Ontario. The value of the estate's $1 million. The original cost in the estate is $300,000. Same taxable capital gain, $700,000. What about if you gave them the option to think about a percentage? What would happen if they wanted to leave 15%? So if we looked at 15% as the number, we know that 15% of 1 million is 150,000. Well, instantly, with this donation, your tax credit increases. Remember, our tax credit at 100,000 was 44,000. Now it's 66,192. The tax has now gone down to 106. So and then the heirs are getting $743,597. But when we're starting to look at it this way, the charitable bequest has increased. The government's contribution towards the bequest has increased. The tax payable to CRA, Receiver General, has gone down. And what's left for the heirs isn't that much different than what it was. Now, also take into consideration what the heirs are getting. They're getting whatever is the remainder of the shares from stocks, the units of mutual fund, other things like art and other things that might most likely be gifted. And then small business corporations can kind of be incorporated in that as well. But what's not included, the registered investments are not included in this calculation. Life insurance is not included as part of this because it flows tax-free. And third is principal residence. So the principal residence, again, is tax-free. So this number of 743,957 is exclusive of principal residence, of insurance, and of the registered investment. So this number now of 743 is a much, much larger number that will be factored into this. And this all becomes part of, when we talk about planned giving, the planning in terms of how that works towards giving. So when we're starting to try to incorporate all those different elements, the leave a percentage of your estate to your charity is by far a very powerful way to describe this. But then we get into this next one. This next scenario is by far the one that everyone always wants to see. And it doesn't matter if it's a fundraiser, if it is if it's a financial planner, if it's a professional advisor, if it's a donor, if it's somebody from the government. And I've met with politicians and had conversations, and I said, well, if you were thinking about making a donation, as part of your estate plan, or a donation to your, an organization that you're near and dear to, let's look at the different types of scenarios that are here. And I said, would you like to see a scenario where you leave a specific amount to charity? Would you like to see a scenario that you leave a percentage to charity of your estate? Or would you like to see an example of where you eliminate the tax altogether? Mr. or Mrs. Minister of Government, which scenario would you like to see? I'd like to see you eliminate the tax on the estate. So we're like, okay, that's great. And we could have made a bet of $1 million that they would have picked that one. So when we start to look at it this way, we start to say, okay, so how much do I have to donate as part of my estate? Not including my insurance, not including my principal residence, not including any of the other sort of esoteric areas of assets that I might hold. And how much do I have to donate to get a tax credit from the government to eliminate my tax? I would have to make a donation of $414,031 in today's dollars, based on these numbers as being the numbers. But right now, you've planted the seed. You've planted this crazy seed in their heads that they can actually leave nothing, potentially, but make the biggest impact, and still at the same time have their families looked after with something that would still be a very meaningful number, as opposed to leaving the money to the government. You're more likely to be honoring this family year in and year out, over and over again, with their contribution. If you were to receive it, put it into a program, put it towards operations, put it into a fund, put it into a trust, put it into a foundation, something along those lines that allows you to actually see yourself engaging with your donors in these conversations. This is the power of planned giving. This is like powerful planned giving at your fingertips. This is something that you can actually be sharing with your donors every single day. Every time you meet with somebody, every time you're going to be reaching out to somebody, you can be telling them something that giving them 0.25% more information than they already have. This is something that they can be doing and you can be doing with them along this donor journey. And this is the part that always, always really excites me. So when we start to think about, what are the other places that, donor advised funds or endowments, and donor advised funds are for specific, types of organizations, specific kind of donors or individuals or families that don't want to have a foundation, do not want the expense of setting up a trust, a foundation, doing all the reporting that's associated with it. But this is an important discussion for you to be having internally, how you can be using DAFs to your advantage. How can that be part of, what you're looking at constructing for your organization for its long-term sustainability, for your programs to thrive and be well-funded, that on January 1st of every year, this is predictive income that can be coming in to your operations to have an impact. That's why having, relationships with advisors, where this gets a little wonky sometimes, is that when you've got the advisors coming in and actually setting up DAFs, that they just want to hold this money for another 50 years of stickiness for their book of business. We want advisors to actually be buying into what your mission is, what your what your programs are, what your operations are, so that these types of funds or these types of endowments can be incorporated into your ongoing revenue predictability, projections around what it is that you need that funding for. When it's clear what that funding is going to be going towards, donors feel a lot more confident about making these types, parting with those kind of funds. And so it's really important that you establish those relationships with your with your advisors, with those advisors that actually bring something to the table for your organizations. So it really, the benefits around the DAF are that you get that the donor gets the immediate tax benefits, but has the opportunity to actually see their funding being put to use year in and year out. They can see the impact of that funding and how it applies to what their values are, what their interests are, and so that relationship continues. And then where you really want to see that the benefit is that you will have this principle as part of your financial modeling. You will have this golden goose that's laying the eggs for you, the golden eggs year in and year out. And that is the comfort to most organizations. And this is where the relationship between the donors and yourselves as the fundraisers is equally as important. It's long-term relationships that you build. They're building the long-term relationships by investing in your organizations. You're building the long-term relationships with those organizations, individuals, to say that you're there and you're there to be stewarding those donations to the best and to the intent of the donors for your organization. So we start to look at an endowment. So you have a donor, they're going to give you $10,000 a year, and they're going to do it for 5 years. You're going to have a return on investment of 6%, very conservative. We're getting to that point where we can almost be doing that with GICs. And then we want to show what this looks like over a multi-year period of time. So these numbers, these variables can show a pledge period of 1 year. It can be the donation amount can be a single occurrence that takes place. It could be $100,000, it could be $1 million, it could be whatever the number it is that would go into this endowment or donor advised fund. And this is really important to actually be able to show this to. Okay, try it the other way. This way. Yeah. So instead of going backwards, I needed to go forward. So this is where I wanted to show how this $10,000 commitment over a 5-year period of time can grow. So you have this being invested, and their commitment grows from 10,000 and 10,000 a year for 5 years. So you're at $50,000 plus the capital cost replacement. So if you had a disbursement amount, and this is where you're selling to the donor. This is the piece that you're really trying to get the donor to focus on, is that your investment in our organization will produce an outcome, and that outcome is going to be 6%. That outcome will have a disbursement of 3.5% or 4.5%. But as you can see here, we've got the 3.5%. There's a fund management fee. So the fund management fee of 100 basis points or 1% is, something that is factored in because you've got the fund manager that's managing the funds for your organization for this particular investment. And then you take the disbursement of 3.5% plus the fund management fee. So 3.5 plus 1 is 4.5. 4.5 minus 6% is 1.5. So therefore, you start to see the recapitalization of the asset over time. So if we take this out 10 years, which we can do 10 years, we'd actually see that this number would be 51,523 compounded at a rate of the 1.5% over that time period, and the donor would actually see how their fund would continue to grow. Again, this is where a lot of institutions that have research funds, that have community funds, that have bursaries, scholarships, professorships, operating programs. So if you're not an educational or healthcare or community foundation, but you're a cultural organization. Well, at the same time, a lot of cultural museum organizations were saved during the pandemic because they had endowment funds that were in place that helped keep the lights on, helped keep the staff supported, even when they were like trying to stretch the dollar as far as possible. So you can see these numbers, and you can see the number from 2025 all the way through 2029. And we can go all the way to 2035 and actually show what that number would look like as well. So when we start to go through all of these different scenarios, you start to understand that that willable, that spot that we started at in terms of plan giving, in terms of asking that fundamental question, do you have a current will, is a very safe place to land. You're not offending anybody by asking that question. You're going to actually open up a dialogue to say, why are you asking me that? I said, well, that half the people in North America over the age of 50 don't have a current will. Oh, well, you're right. I've been meaning to update my will. Aha. So that's the first part in their acknowledgement that they have some planning to do. And by being able to take them through and illustrate what might be an option around this is a great starting point. But when we start to think of, financial sustainability, consistent income coming in, supporting your programs, ensuring that your programs are successful, looking at minimizing the financial constraints, because we know that you as fundraisers are all busy. You're going 110 miles an hour and you're going full bore in terms of trying to raise money from other streams. Having some consistency coming in from planned gifts that you can actually be measuring, because once you start going through that step with your donors, you're going to pretty quickly find out where their heads are at in terms of their numbers. And they may be actually looking at making a donation sooner while they're alive in terms of what they can be actually comfortable imparting with as a donation that would factor into the benefits for you and your organization. So what donation gift is right for your donor? Well, we created this chart, and the idea here is that we want to have, what immediate impact, a bequest. Well, you're going to have to wait, but that's okay. You can have the opportunity of building your relationship with your donors. Is there any ongoing income that's going to come from that bequest right now? No. But is there a long-term legacy piece? Yes. Are there tax benefits that are associated with it? Absolutely. When we're starting to look at a DAF and endowment, well, is there an immediate impact once the DAF or endowment is set? Yes, as we just saw with the endowment structure of showing somebody how they can actually be creating an endowment with your organization and what that income would result in for them long term. Ongoing income, for sure. There's always that way of looking at that and incorporating it. Is there a long-term legacy? For as long as that DAF is still in place, are there tax benefits associated with the estate? Then we start to look at the different components. Is there, from the willable, is there an immediate impact? No. Is there ongoing income? No. But maybe yes, because I'm going to say that on the willable side, something may spark that individual to think maybe there's a part of my current estate plan that I should think about making a donation today. And that starts the ongoing engagement with the donor and their advisors to look at maybe there is a stock, maybe there is a mutual fund, maybe there is something else that's there that can be used to that benefit. And then we start to look at the willable RSP RIF. Is there immediate impact? Yes, absolutely. Can they be thinking about using their registered investment if they don't need it, if they don't need all of it, that they can be using that with their advisors sitting down with them to look at the strategies of how that can be incorporated in a gift today. So that's something to think about. Ongoing income, yes. Looking at the RSP, it's a long-term legacy strategy, but it's a current legacy strategy and how that factors in with their estate plan. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser because next month's webinar is going to be on the different components about that willable RSP RIF. And I really think that this is the one that actually has, just grows. And it grows on people because a lot of people started their RSPs back, some in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 1990s. And they started these RSPs, and it's RSP season all the time. And people have been putting money into these different, I don't know what's going on my screen, but just to show you what some of these options might be, next month is going to be on this very area. So assume that the person has an RSP that's worth, my computer has a mind of its own right now. So let's look at what a 10% of a person's RSP might be. It'd be $100,000. They're going to owe $492,000 on their $1 million. And then what we want to show is what their heirs would be receiving. But if they did $100,000 donation, that would reduce their tax to $442 from $492, and they would leave their heirs $457,000. So one of the things that we find really, really interesting in all of this is a lot of people may not need their RSPs, may not need their RIFs. They may be having income coming in from other streams that benefit them. And this is money that just might be sitting there, and we want to spend a good portion of next month's webinar focusing on the different elements and how cool this is to actually walk your donors through this, because it'll change their way of thinking about their giving and might be doing something to expedite their giving to organizations. So we've kind of come to the end of our presentation. I thank each and every one of you for participating. Again, as many of you have come back month after month, and we're really excited about it. But we really want you to actually go and start some conversations with your donors to actually help them help you in terms of building a solid financial sustainable base for your organization. So if you have any questions, fire away. If you want to follow up afterwards, by all means do so, and we will open up the floor to any questions. Well, if we haven't had any questions, I'm going to say thank you and see you next month for our presentation called Give More from Registered Investments on May 13th at noon Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.